Hi, it's the afternoon now on September the 16th, and it is a delightful, warm and not too windy afternoon, quite unusual for this late in the year. And it could fairly be called a golden afternoon, so I want to use it to recreate part of the most famous golden afternoon in Oxford's history. But before doing that, I just wanted to show you Port Meadow on this golden afternoon. Because it really does look delightful. There's the Medley Sailing Club in the distance on the left. There's something going on in the river, but I can't make out what. There's one or two people walking. There's Wolvercote in the distance north. And somewhere between us and the hill in the distance is the lost village of Seacourt, which I tried to find in a previous video, roughly somewhere on the same level as Binsey. And the air is pretty still, and the sun is warm on my head. So, the most famous golden afternoon in the history of Oxford is the one that allegedly took place on July the 4th, 1862. And that is when Charles Lutwidge Dodgson, or Lewis Carroll as he is better known, took Alice and her two sisters, together with a friend of his, on a boat trip from Folly Bridge to Godstow. Folly Bridge being down the Thames to just beyond the centre of Oxford, and Godstow being up the Thames somewhere around there. The most famous landmark for Godstow today is the ruins of the nunnery. And it is apparently on that boat trip that Carroll first told Alice the story, Alice's Adventures Underground, which was to become Alice's Adventures in Wonderland.
You're doing the same thing.
So, I have a copy of the Alice stories, and I also have a copy of this, the Annotated Alice, which is a book by mathematics populariser Martin Gardner, who used to write for the Scientific American. And he explains a lot of the background, including words and phrases that one might not know these days. And according to him, the friend that I mentioned was the Reverend Robinson Duckworth, who was a fellow of Trinity College, Oxford, and later became canon of Westminster, which is an important religious position. And Carroll and Duckworth took the three Liddell sisters on a rowing exhibition up the Thames. The oldest sister was Marina, aged 13. Alice was second at age 10, and the youngest was Edith at age 8, and Carroll was 30. The date was Friday, July the 4th. Quote, "As memorable a day in the history of literature," W.H. Auden has observed, "as it is in American history." The trip was about 3 miles, beginning at Folly Bridge and ending at Godstow. "We had tea on the bank there," Carroll recorded in his diary, "and did not reach Christchurch again until 8:15, when we took them up to my rooms to see my collection of microphotographs, and restored them to the deanery just before 9. 7 months later," Gardner says, Carroll added the following note to this entry: "On which occasion I told them the fairy tale of Alice's adventures underground." And that was what became Alice's adventures in Wonderland. Now I'm going to walk to the Thames. Although it is gloriously still and gloriously warm today, the wind can still be stronger in Port Meadow than around, just because it's such an open space. So I need to see whether the wind is so strong when I get to the river that it will make my reading difficult to hear. And I'm wondering, Alice, her sisters, the Reverend Duckworth and Carroll would have passed this way on a rowing boat or in a rowing boat, and presumably were I standing here then, I would just about be able to see the rowing boat. However, I don't know what else was missing then that is here now. For example, that Bailey Bridge is, as it's called over there, crosses the river, but it was built in 1947. Was there a bridge before that? Was there a bridge when Carroll made his trip, or did one need to rely on a ferry service to get from one side of the river to the other? Likewise, there is the so-called Rainbow Bridge or Red Bridge, which crosses the river there, close to Medley Farm. But was there anything like that then? Port Meadow, I suppose, hadn't changed very much from what it is now, and probably neither have the trees on the other side. And neither, I suppose, had the ruins at Godstow. This path probably wasn't here then, or at least wasn't to the same standard, because I think the latest coating of gravel and the latest resurfacing is at most 10 years ago. So what was here in 1862? And on that Friday in 1862, who would have been standing or walking along the side of Port Meadow, along the river there, to see the rowing boat, unwittingly passing the initiation of one of the greatest pieces of English literature ever. Well, that would be a charming bridge to stand on to do the reading, but I don't want to get in the way of passers-by. This is an Oxford Preservation Trust award for 1992, and it's a convenient place to rest. This is a photo by Lewis Carroll of the three sisters. Edith, Marina and Alice is on the right. And that was taken in July 1860 in the Deanery Garden in Christchurch. And that is Alice photo taken in 1858, summer 1858, again in the Deanery Garden in Christchurch. The Liddell father was Dean of Christchurch, meaning the head of the college, and he lived in a residence called the Deanery. That's what the word Deanery means, which was in the grounds of Christchurch and I think built onto one of the other buildings. So that's in the Deanery. That's Alice in the Deanery Garden, 1858, and the other photo was the Three Sisters, 1860. This is a collection of photos taken by Lewis Carroll, albums that found their way to Princeton University. I don't have photos of the golden afternoon itself. To be fair, the photographic method that Carroll was using, I don't think there's any way he could have taken photos on a boat. You had to start with a plate of tin, get it coated with something called collodion, which was a nitrocellulose solution, and then just before you were going to take the photo, add silver nitrate, and there had to be one or two other chemicals in the mix, and that provided a light-sensitive solution, well, light-sensitive sort of colloid, I suppose, jelly-like stuff, that when light hit it would deposit, I think it was flecks of actual silver, and then by a suitable fixing and developing process you could actually get a proper photograph out of this. Simple, easy and fast it wasn't, and it needed a lot of practice, some expensive chemicals, and ideally a studio. So I'd be very surprised if there are any photos from the boat trip itself, though there could, I suppose, be some from just before or just after it. But anyway, that's what Alice and the other two sisters looked like. So I'm standing facing a bit of river that Alice and the others must have passed over or through on this trip, and I'm now going to read chapter 1 of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Chapter 1, Down the Rabbit Hole. Alice was beginning to get very tired of sitting by her sister on the bank and of having nothing to do. Once or twice she had peeped into the book her sister was reading, but it had no pictures or conversations in it. And what is the use of a book, thought Alice, without pictures or conversations? So she was considering in her own mind, as well as she could, for the hot day made her feel very sleepy and stupid, whether the pleasure of making a daisy chain would be worth the trouble of getting up and picking the daisies, when suddenly a white rabbit with pink eyes ran close by her. There was nothing so very remarkable in that, nor did Alice think it so very much out of the way to hear the rabbit say to itself, oh dear, I shall be too late." When she thought it over afterwards, it occurred to her that she ought to have wondered at this, but at the time it seemed quite natural. But when the rabbit actually took a watch out of its waistcoat pocket and looked at it and then hurried on, Alice started to her feet, for it flashed across her mind that she had never before seen a rabbit with either a waistcoat pocket or a watch to take out of it. And, burning with curiosity, she ran across the field after it, and was just in time to see it pop down a large rabbit hole under the hedge. In another moment down went Alice after it, never considering how in the world she was to get out again. The rabbit hole went straight on like a tunnel for some way, and then dipped suddenly down, so suddenly that Alice had not a moment to think about stopping herself, before she found herself falling down what seemed to be a very deep well. Either the well was very deep, or she fell very slowly, for she had plenty of time as she went down to look about her and to wonder what was going to happen next. First, she tried to look down and make out what she was coming to, but it was too dark to see anything. Then she looked at the sides of the well and noticed that they were filled with cupboards and bookshelves. Here and there she saw maps and pictures hung upon pegs. She took down a jar from one of the shelves as she passed. It was labelled orange marmalade, but to her great disappointment it was empty. She did not like to drop the jar for fear of killing somebody underneath, so managed to put it into one of the cupboards as she fell past it. Well, thought Alice to herself, after such a fall as this, I shall think nothing of tumbling downstairs. How brave they'll all think me at home. Why, I wouldn't say anything about it, even if I fell off the top of the house. Which was very likely true. Down, down, down. Would the fall never come to an end? I wonder how many miles I've fallen by this time, she said aloud. I must be getting somewhere near the centre of the earth. Let me see. That would be 4,000 miles down, I think. For you see, Alice had learnt several things of this sort in her lessons in the schoolroom, and though this was not a very good opportunity for showing off her knowledge, as there was no one to listen to her, still it was good practice to say it over. Yes, that's about the right distance. But then, I wonder what latitude or longitude I've got to. Alice had not the slightest idea what latitude was, or longitude either, but she thought they were nice grand words to say. Presently she began again. I wonder if I shall fall right through the earth. How funny it'll seem to come out among the people that walk with their heads downwards. The antipathies, I think. She was rather glad there was no one listening this time, as it didn't sound at all the right word. But I shall have to ask them what the name of the country is, you know. Please, ma'am, is this New Zealand or Australia? And she tried to curtsy as she spoke. Fancy, curtsying as you're falling through the air. Do you think you could manage it? And what an ignorant little girl she'll think me for asking. No, it'll never do to ask. Perhaps I shall see it written up somewhere. Down, down, down. There was nothing else to do, so Alice soon began talking again. Dinah will miss me very much tonight, I should think. Dinah was the cat. I hope they'll remember her saucer of milk at tea time, Dinah, my dear. I wish you were down here with me. There are no mice in the air, I'm afraid, but you might catch a bat, and that's very like a mouse, you know. But do cats eat bats, I wonder? And here Alice began to get rather sleepy, and went on saying to herself, in a dreamy sort of way, Do cats eat bats? Do cats eat bats? And sometimes, do bats eat cats? For you see, as she couldn't answer either question, it didn't much matter which way she put it. She felt that she was dozing off, and had just begun to dream that she was walking hand in hand with Dinah, and was saying to her very earnestly, Now, Dinah, tell me the truth. Did you ever eat a bat? When suddenly, thump, thump, down she came upon a heap of sticks and dry leaves, and the fall was over. Alice was not a bit hurt, and she jumped up to her feet in a moment. She looked up, but it was all dark overhead. Before her was another long passage, and the white rabbit was still in sight, hurrying down it. There was not a moment to be lost. Away went Alice like the wind, and was just in time to hear the white rabbit say, as it turned a corner, Oh, my ears and whiskers, how late it's getting. She was close behind it when she turned the corner, but the rabbit was no longer to be seen. She found herself in a long, low hall, which was lit up by a row of lamps hanging from the roof. There were doors all round the hall, but they were all locked. And when Alice had been all the way down one side and up the other, trying every door, she walked sadly down the middle, wondering how she was ever to get out again. Suddenly she came upon a little three-legged table, all made of solid glass, There was nothing on it but a tiny golden key, and Alice's first idea was that this might belong to one of the doors of the hall. But alas, either the locks were too large, or the key was too small, but at any rate it would not open any of them. However, on the second time around, she came upon a low curtain she had not noticed before, and behind it was a little door about 15 inches high. She tried the little golden key in the lock, and to her great delight it fitted. Alice opened the door and found it led into a small passage, not much larger than a rat hole. She knelt down and looked along the passage into the loveliest garden you ever saw. How she longed to get out of that dark hall and wander about among those beds of bright flowers and those cool fountains. But she could not even get her head through the doorway. And even if my head would go through, thought poor Alice, it would be of very little use without my shoulders. Oh, how I wish I could shut up like a telescope. I think I could, if I only knew how to begin. For, you see, so many out-of-the-way things had happened lately that Alice had begun to think that very few things indeed were really impossible. There seemed to be no use in waiting by the little door, so she went back to the table, half hoping she might find another key on it, or at any rate a book of rules for shutting people up like telescopes. This time she found a little bottle on the table, which certainly was not here before, said Alice. And tied round the neck of the bottle was a paper label with the words "Drink Me" beautifully printed on it in large letters. It was all very well to say "drink me," but the wise little Alice was not going to do that in a hurry. "No, I'll look first," she said, "and see whether it's marked poison or not." For she had read several nice little stories about children who had got burnt and eaten up by wild beasts and other unpleasant things, all because they would not remember the simple rules their friends had taught them, such as that a red-hot poker will burn you if you hold it too long, and that if you cut your finger very deeply with a knife, it usually bleeds. And she had never forgotten that, if you drink much from a bottle marked poison, it is almost certain to disagree with you sooner or later. However, this bottle was not marked poison, so Alice ventured to taste it, and finding it very nice, it had in fact a sort of mixed flavour of cherry tart, custard, pineapple, roast turkey, toffee and hot buttered toast. She very soon finished it off. Okay, well, I shall read some more from that before long. And to anybody who wants some ideas for making money out of cooking, how about selling cakes with the Alice potion flavour? Maybe get rid of the turkey though. I'll see you next time.